Morning, everybody, or afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. My name is Jase, and as mentioned, I'm with Associated Engineering, and I've had the opportunity to work directly with the gentleman up at the Tibbitt to Contwoyto Winter Road, and continue to work with them. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we've done up there, and touch on some of the things that we're going to be doing moving forward to kind of bring them into this era, as well as hopefully push them a little bit onto the cutting edge of innovation and stuff along the Winter Road. Let me know if you can see my screen here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview as to the road itself and some of the statistics of the road before we get started. Everybody knows probably the series Ice Road Truckers. This is Tibbitt to Contwoyto Winter Road is where Ice Road Truckers actually originally started. Although it was made famous there, they were also kicked out because they obviously, like reality TV does, they exaggerated the risk and that sort of thing. So they were only given a little bit. They were only given the 2 years, and then they were actually pushed out because they made it seem like it was a little bit more risky than it actually is. A lot of engineering and technology goes into that. It's approximately 400 kilometers the last 2 years. Originally, it went all the way up to the Lupin mine, which is 600 kilometers, 87% of which was over lake ice, the rest over small portages. If you can imagine, the speed limits there are between 10 and 25 kilometers an hour, which makes for a very slow progress up the road. However, empty trucks to bring back once they've dropped off their loads can come back at about 60 to 70, which makes for an interesting development because they developed the road as it is a highway, so there is lanes and passing lanes throughout, but they also build express lanes to try to facilitate getting some of the trucks back quickly. As they've only got 51 days to do the movement, they want to get as much in and as quickly as possible to facilitate the mines. The ice thickness during the road is continuously monitored. Typically by the end of the season, it exceeds 42 inches. Most of that is traveled on highway legal GVW at about 39 inches is probably the average, well, is the average for the majority of the season, with it getting up to 42 in the last few weeks. The heaviest loads that we've seen to date are in exceedance of 95,000 kg. So the road itself it adheres to a very strict QA, obviously with the fact that it is over lake ice. They use ground penetrating radar, and they drag essentially what looks like a sled up and down the road. And they do essentially GPS readings and ice thickness readings every centimeter, and then plot that and do daily inspections and site inspections at each location to ensure the ice is maintained and that it is of sufficient thickness. Obviously, through the time that the road's been built, they've run into issues with washouts. There's a wave that carries on when a vehicle's driving on the water that can cause issues with ice breaking up, especially when you get to portages. So they've been developing innovations such as ice piers, which they'll put in prior to the ice starting to form, that'll hold up and support the ice as the movement happens, to try to reduce some of that breakage. They keep a very robust health and safety program using tablets to manage the road and keep everybody in connection, which includes speeding, accidents, and management. And all the ice engineering is managed by a subsidiary of Associated, which is through Norex Ice Engineering. Some of the functional stats are they're open for only about 51 days, give or take, depending on the weather, obviously. They ship over 8,000 shipments up and down the road, exceeding 300,000 tons. They run for those 51 days. They run 4 shipments every 20 minutes, and sometimes we'll do more depending on what the weather is and how backed up they get due to weather. There's 12 checkpoints throughout the road over the 400 kilometers. and one staff at each checkpoint that monitors the shipments so that they can track when they come in, when they leave, where they're located, because weather can come up quite quickly, and it can hold everybody out for days on end. The existing system that they were working with was essentially like a list management, if you can consider Excel, but on the web. So it was, although it allowed everybody to communicate, there was very little information that could be passed to prepare people for what was coming and what was happening on the road, whether people are stopped or at a location. So our goal was to develop something flexible that would allow everybody to communicate throughout the system instantaneously, or as best we could, obviously, and allow them to make decisions on where they would ship the next shipment, or if they'd move it based on whether how many shipments were at a certain location, because obviously you could only house so many at each place, so that it would stop from getting too congested. It would stop everybody from pushing vehicles up in bad weather that may get stuck part of the way or have to stop on the ice. And then it would integrate with the current health and safety program that they had, so that if a driver had an accident, was given a penalty or a ticket, or was banned from the road, that the other system, the dispatch system, wouldn't allow them to continue to run shipments up and down the road. So the dispatch process that we created was essentially, we wanted to connect carriers who are creating the shipments and in charge of getting specific goods to and from the mines. We needed them to be able to create shipments in an efficient and correct manner that would then be able to book a time where they could send this out, because we are looking at 4 trucks at a time every 20 minutes. And then dispatch would be able to review and send them out or approve them, so that everybody was in communication. Before, this was usually done on the phone or through email, which, as you can imagine, can take a little bit of time. So what we did is we implemented a live interface where the carriers would create their shipments. As they're creating the shipments, it would be validated based on criteria, so that it would let them know if there's certain issues that they're having, whether it's overweight for the size of trailer that they're carrying, those kind of things. If it was too big of a shipment that might require extra engineering review, all those things would notify them as they're building it, so that they could expedite that process and get that shipment approved quicker. Once they had that and they were past that validation stage, they'd be able to pick a time, so they'd be able to view the schedule that's currently available, find the next available time, and line the shipment up so that they knew when they had to have the truck available to leave with the other shipments. We implemented a drag and drop interface so they could rearrange their schedule as needed, and updates across the whole system are live. So if a carrier schedules a shipment at 9 o'clock and it's 8 o'clock now, and I'm a dispatcher, I can see that immediately when they're booked it, and if there's any issues, I can contact them, which happens within seconds, as opposed to, hopefully you get that email. Once dispatch saw that item had come in, they get a notification, or they'd see the shipment added to the schedule, and it would be marked as unapproved. So they'd know that they have to go back through and look, make sure the paperwork matched the trailer and the shipment, make sure the driver had the proper credentials to make the delivery, and to make sure that there's any load. So some of the oversized loads have to go through a scale and have to match to make sure that those goods match the proper weight. Once they had all that, they would dispatch the group of loads or the convoy at the time as the time occurred. So the dispatch process is very similar. This is a screenshot of the dashboard, and I'll show you that in a minute here. So what it would do is, this would be the scheduling that the dispatch would see, and as items were added, you'd see them show up here in the dashboard, and it would essentially build a convoy. Any of the shipments that are yellow color still need to be approved by dispatch in order to be allowed to ship on the road. And anything with the star would let them know that that's an experienced driver who could lead a convoy, or who is fully capable of running shipments up and down the road with either previous experience on the road or somewhere else that was sufficient. The number is the person who's actually driving it, and the acronym that you see in the corner is the destination that they're going to go to. So the idea here was that not only would we update everybody live, but they'd be able to, just at a glance, kind of get a sense of exactly where they were going, who is going there, and if they had the credentials to go there without having to dig in and into the data like they used to. So I'm just going to switch to the screen here, and I'm just going to jump into the dashboard. So this is that same dashboard. I've condensed it so that we can see that. But if I'm dispatch, I'd be able to look at the times that we have here. I could add a shipment on the fly. It would let me know if that shipment exists, and then I could just add that to the shipment. And what you'll see is they could rearrange shipments as they needed. My test is a little bit on the slower side, but they could rearrange their shipments and organize them as they needed to. This was something that was became quite important because in the past, like I mentioned, they if there was any change here, they would have to make a phone call or follow up with the email. They would wait for that response, and if the driver here happened to show up when they had already changed them or moved them around, then they had to send them back, and it became a very inefficient. In this way, everybody's notified when a move happens. They can respond immediately, and before a carrier or anybody sends a truck to dispatch in order to be sent up the road, they could recheck their schedule just to make sure nothing changed before they left. Of course, I got to start B. So the next step was how do we keep everybody informed as they move up the road? What we wanted to do is we wanted to provide the ability for checkpoint operators or staff at checkpoints to know not only what's there now, but what's coming at them. Historically, what would happen is they would be sitting, it was all done by radio. As a convoy was coming in, basically the minute before they got there or a few minutes before they got there, they'd radio in and they'd say here, you know, there's 4 of us coming in, our numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if there's shipments coming in from both directions and leaving from that location in both directions, you can imagine you've got essentially 4 trucks from each direction going in and going out. It really becomes hard to manage. So what we did is we set up a dashboard where they could, convoy leaders could call it in, but dispatchers were able to just, like I showed you with the drag and drop, just be able to click and in the dashboard and be able to identify which numbers are coming without having to go find that data and document it. That involved allowing them to be able to enter them quickly or select them. So what we had decided to do is show them, and I'll show that dashboard here in a moment, but give them a dashboard where it shows incoming, outgoing in both directions and which trucks are sitting there able to go. So if I had to access an incoming, outgoing in both directions, I guess at the same time, it's 7 clicks to do what we used to have to do in a search, find, move, and change. So what it did is not only it gave them the opportunity to do things more quickly, but it became the QA/QC of being able to not make mistakes or being able to manage that without making mistakes increased considerably. So I'll jump out again and I'll show you that same dashboard. So this is what that would look like. So as you can see, this is one of the busiest locations that they have, and they've got 4 trucks every 20 minutes, or in this case, 2 trucks, 4 trucks, 3 trucks coming northbound incoming, southbound incoming, and they've got a set of 6 trucks that are going, or 5 trucks that are going outgoing. So what this allowed them to do is just select the ones as they called them in that were coming incoming trucks with a single click versus going through and managing that individually, as you can imagine, in an Excel document. So the next step was to try to give that same overview of incoming, outgoing, and where everybody was, and the statistics of the road at a glance. One of the most important pieces that they found that they needed in order to be managing the road was to easily get an idea of what's happening, so that they could make decisions quickly, again, about either shipping out traffic, stopping traffic at a location, whether that's through weather, an accident, a crash, that sort of thing. So what we implemented was a map view. So this is a live update. At this point, it updates every 3 minutes. And what it does is it shows directionality. So between each of the checkpoint locations, it shows which trucks are going in which direction and how many of those trucks are on the road at that point in time. Then you'd be able to click in on one of these numbers and you'd be able to see the list of those shipments. You'd be able to sort, filter, view, and be able to see the full timeline as to where that shipment is, when it left, and any of the previous information from the previous locations. Very similar to what you'd see on something like a Pure Later site or a FedEx, where you're able to track where that shipment is throughout. So on top of that, each user that we found within each role that's within the management of the road has a different need for that. Although the map made sense right across the board to give everybody a sense of not only be able to find their shipments, see the timelines, but also wanted a way to inform higher level decision makers as to how the road is progressing. They have a specific set of goals they want to meet each year. And in the past, in order to figure out where they are with those goals, it was a fairly involved process of reporting and mapping in order to find that out. So what we did is we focused the dashboard to each role type, like you saw with the checkpoint one that shows incoming and outgoing in a way that they could manage all at the same time. The management side of things involves being able to tell the total number of shipments to date, what's been billable, because the road is managed by the mines. It's the only, but I'm not sure it's the only anymore, but it used to be the only joint venture between essentially competitors who work together to get all the supplies that they need in order to manage their mine and run the mine throughout the summer. And that's the main mines that you'll see there are the Diavik and Ekati mines, which is through De Beers and I'm going to forget the other one, of course. And so they work together in order to patrol this. Now, in order to keep that, they need to charge each other, very similar to a toll road. So every shipment is billed based on the location and the weight. And that's what they see here for stats. So they're able to click in through these, see where they are with how many completed trips, how many of those are billable, how many are in transit at the current time, and then what the schedule looks like coming forward. So if they know incoming weather is coming, they'll push down and say, we've only got 50% of the schedule filled for today. We've got weather coming in. We want to push those up to 5 trucks for 20 minutes, or we want to push the carriers to get their shipments in because we're going to shut down the road by mid-afternoon. It gives them an idea of how many incidents they've seen on the road to date, and obviously infractions like speeding, that sort of thing. In turn, we also automated all their reporting. So a daily report was generated at midnight every night. They were able to see the changes in the ice thickness, and they're able to, that was all at their fingertips now, so that they can make, again, those decisions quickly and informed. So I'll give you a quick view of the dashboards again. Here. So this also includes, so I'll show you some of those live updates that we were talking about, as well as a quick, I know I'm running low on time. So this will give you that idea of how the drag and drop and immediate live update schedule works. You'll see that here. Actually, I'll move that over a little bit. If I go and update 710, you'll notice here he'll move immediately. So everything throughout the system, whether I approve it, let's see here. So this is that, it's a little bit squished here, so you'll see that, but gives you an overview of how they've progressed or where the shipment is in the progression. And then as I update it, you'll notice that I approved that one, so now it's blue over here. So it just gives you an idea of how quickly they were able to inform each other of that transition. And this side of things, I will show you the reporting and then we'll jump to the end here. So this will give you an idea of the reporting that allowed them. So typically when they were looking at this before, each one of these reports would have to be generated by somebody every day or every few days in order to give them an overview. But this gives them an idea of total tons to date. They charge by kilometer per ton. So this gave them the average kilometer per ton to date. Total trips, how many drivers were on the road for each carrier, and then the daily report that I was talking about before that was generated every night that would show everything in the current season to date for individual trips and statistics, as well as the changing of the ice thickness so that they could understand where that's happening and how those daily slots or the daily tea times, which is the schedule for the day, how many actually got filled in each day so they could see where their low spots and coordinate that with some of their weather issues. So to summarize everything, some of the next steps we're looking at is in order to take a little bit more pressure off of and add a little bit more accuracy to the check-in and check-out and management up the road, we're looking at implementing some of the mesh networking that's out there now. So each of the drivers carries a road number, which is when a driver comes up to work on the road, they're given a specific number, and that's has to be with them at all times. If not, they risk being banned off the road. So what we're looking at doing is including a mesh networking module onto the number, which would then allow the trucks, because it's quite barren, we can add towers that basically will allow line of sight or even further than that, and allow location, acceleration, and any of the notifications that we want to do based on speed, time analysis, to obviously bounce all the way up the trucks to each of the stops. So we'll know, the idea would be to know when trucks are stopped, to know how quickly trucks are coming. If they do stop, drivers are allowed to stop and rest. So convoys can change in between each destination. They can join up with another convoy. So that would better inform locations, but even more so is to automate check-in and check-out. So if you can imagine systems that are out there currently that deal with parking or management of trucks or goods at a warehouse, same idea would be there, is that as trucks come into a location, as they stay at a location, they'd constantly be updating the system so that we would know if they're sitting at a location still, if they've come into location, if they're leaving a location, and that would just be overseen by that staff member and ensure that we're QA/QCing that to make sure that that's accurate all the way through. We'd have a better idea of drivers where they are if there's whiteouts. Some of the whiteouts will get so bad that you literally can't see your hand in front of your face, which is, I thought maybe a bit of an exaggeration until I experienced it. But because of that, weather can blow in within minutes, and trucks can be stuck in the middle of a lake. And if they're stuck there for a day or two, it becomes risky. They carry food and they carry supplies for that just in case. But if we don't know where they are, it makes rescue a little bit more difficult, because you've got 400 or 500 kilometers, at maximum 115 kilometers in between a checkpoint, and they could be anywhere along that line. So we're looking at mesh networking in different innovative ways in order to allow better tracking of that, but also to increase safety, monitor speed, and understand locations of everybody. And from that, we also want to try to inform public. A portion of the road that they get dispatched on ends up on public road for a portion before they actually enter the ice road. And a lot of public tourism and that sort of thing is along that road. And when you have large convoys, people tend to try to fit it in between. So we're going to look at implementing a public information system where people can see when a truck convoy is dispatched, where they are when they get dispatched, so they can estimate when the best time to travel that road would be. Any questions at all? Oh, I see something. No questions. I've wowed everybody. They're stunned with silence. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I will pass it off to the next presenter. Okay, and that's on to Gareth.
Yes, thanks, Jase. Yeah, great presentation, and yeah, wowed me, that's for sure, and really impressed with all the great data, visuals, real-time aspect of your information system. So yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen here, and I'll get it into presentation mode. And there we go. And yeah, I'd just like to say hi to everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar. And so I'll try to take a little bit of time here to talk about TRAINFO and traveler information systems at railway crossings. And so my name is Garreth Rempel. I'm CEO and co-founder of TRAINFO. And we exist really to provide safe and seamless mobility at railway crossings. And the presentation today will give a case study of how we're doing this in the city of Winnipeg for a particular railway crossing. So I'm actually going to start right from the beginning of my presentation rather than from the end, and that will be better for everybody. There we go. So today's webinar, I'll talk a little bit about TRAINFO. Probably a lot of you haven't heard about our company. You don't know what we do and how we work. So I'll just give a very quick overview about us, which will lead into the project background and exactly what we're doing, and talk about some of the ITS technology that we're using and the information systems that we're developing. Give some really high-level indication of some of the performance and the results of our system at Waverley St railway crossing, and follow up with some concluding remarks. So TRAINFO, we're a real-time railroad crossing information company. We produce real-time railroad crossing blockage data. We measure traffic impacts caused by blocked railroad crossings, and we provide ITS solutions to mitigate these traffic impacts. And so our company has a number of different tools and technologies that we utilize to provide these services. We have proprietary trackside sensors that detect train movements. These are installed off rail property, so these are completely independent of the railroads themselves. We have interactive dashboards, and I can show you an example of that, of the data we collect and how we summarize it. We have live maps, so you can see exactly which crossings are blocked, which are cleared, which are predicted to be blocked. We have roadside signs that we use to inform motorists. We also inform motorists with mobile apps, and we can also integrate into traffic management centers to give traffic engineers or transportation professionals some real-time data where they work. So, here's a very simple example of our services and how it looks in the field. So you have a railway crossing and you have a train crossing the road. One of our our first product is called Crossing Insights, and that helps people understand when and how long crossings are blocked. And for this product, we just put our train detection sensor in the field, and we give you access to an online dashboard and live web map to see what's going on at the crossing. But we also know that traffic backs up at railway crossings, and we might want to understand what that issue is all about. And for that, we have a second product called Congestion Insights. And here we help understand traffic impacts caused by the blocked crossings. And to do this, we install Bluetooth sensors on either side of the crossing. These Bluetooth sensors tell us how long it takes to get from one to another across our railway track. And we also know when that track is blocked by a train. And so we can take that information and calculate traffic delays very accurately with this real-time live data. And then the third product that we have, we might want to mitigate the traffic delay and queuing at a crossing. Our third product is called TRAINFO Mobility. And here we mitigate traffic impacts caused by blocked crossings. And to do this, we use more technology. We have roadside signs that we install in the field. We have mobile apps that we integrate into. And we also have the ability to tie into traffic signals and traffic signal controllers to try to give them some information on how to adjust signal timing before a train arrives and then once it leaves. Different applications that have been used with our technology, traffic operations, traveler information, city planning in terms of understanding what's the impact of railway crossing blockages across the city and then how to maybe put fire stations and plan for them. Funding requests, so you might want to have really accurate data to build a business case to get federal funding for a grade separation, and just public information, having this as part of an open data type approach. So the project background, I'll jump into the actual application here now. What we were trying to do is help the city of Winnipeg inform road users on Waverley Street, and in particular northbound road users on Waverley Street, when a railway crossing was going to be blocked, and give them live information that would help them make a decision, either to keep going and accept the amount of delay that the sign was telling them that they should expect, or to give them an option to reroute around the blockage altogether. So that was the main objective of this project, and I'll show you how we approached it. So this is a map, high level right now, and a little bit busy about our study area. And I'll zoom in and clarify what we're doing here on this slide. So we were looking at Waverley Street. It's in the middle of this slide, and the railway crossing is nearly at the top of the slide there, crossing Waverley Street. And that was really the scope of what we were looking at. So there's the railway crossing right there near the top of the map. And on either side, there's Kenaston Boulevard and there's Pembina Highway. Both of those roads also meet the railroad, but they're grade separated. So there's an underpass on both of those roads as options. And so here, just kind of clarifying our study area, Waverley Street is right in the middle. McGillivray Boulevard is an east-west major roadway, so is Taylor Avenue. And then we have Pembina Highway and Kenaston Boulevard on the east and west side shown here. And so Waverley Street, some high-level characteristics about it. It's a major north-south arterial, a major commuter route. There's about 30,000 vehicles per day. It's 4 lanes divided, lots of traffic signals on this corridor. The posted speed limit ranges from 60 to 70 kilometers per hour. And there's about 30 or more trains per day that are crossing at that railway crossing shown in red there. And like I mentioned, part of the scope of this project was to help drivers reroute. And so there's an east reroute option via McGillivray to go towards Pembina Highway and continue north under the underpass. There's one west reroute option, again via McGillivray Boulevard. That will take you to Kenaston Boulevard, and again, there's an underpass for you to get past the tracks. And there's a second west-bound reroute option via Sterling Line Parkway that does something very similar. Connects to Kenaston Boulevard, and there's an underpass available for drivers there. So that was the idea here. Give drivers information that there's a blockage ahead, and if they want to choose to do so, choose a reroute option around it. Sticking just with the background here a little bit, this is just a really high-level land use map here to show that there's many different road users that are being impacted. Residential road users, this is, like I said, a major commuter route. There's commercial and that type of activity going on. So there's people that need to access this area from other areas of the city. And there's also a major industrial park. So there's a lot of truck movements and a lot of vehicles that are really dependent on on-time delivery. A couple of pictures here. So this is one, if you were standing at that location, kind of the northeast corner there and looking south, you would see you would see this during a railway crossing blockage event, a really long line of vehicles, so you can get a sense of how severe the congestion and traffic delay is. If you were to stand on the other side of the intersection and look in the opposite direction, this is looking towards the railway crossing, and again, you can see a really long line of vehicles being delayed. So with that in mind, what did we do? What was the technology that we used as an advanced traveler information system? So at a very high level, we installed train detection and Bluetooth sensors. This was to monitor trains and vehicle traffic, and when they were delayed and for how long. We developed crossing blockage prediction profiles. So with our sensors and our data, we could actually predict when a train would arrive at the crossing before it actually did, and we could also predict when it would clear. So we were very accurate in making those predictions. And then with that, we could also predict the impact on travel time. So we would look at the time of day and the type of train that was arriving and how long it would block the crossing. And over time, we developed a sample size where we could develop predictions and say, if there's a 6-minute train coming at 3:35 p.m. on a Thursday, given the existing traffic conditions we're currently monitoring, here's how much delay we expect this event to cause. Another thing we did is we took all that information. We actually calculated precisely how much vehicle delay occurred as a historical measure. So we would look at the last 6 months, and we could provide a very accurate measurement to say this is how much vehicle delay there was due to railroad crossing blockages on this corridor. And then the final thing that we did is we developed dynamic message sign messages, DMS messages, and this was to help inform drivers through roadside signs about what was going on, and I'll show some examples of that in a bit. So returning to our scope of work here, or our area, this slide will show kind of where we put our sensors and what it looked like in the field and how it all worked together. So again, Waverley Street is in the middle, running north-south. Our railroad crossing is also near the top there, shown in red. And so one of the first things we did is we put in our train detection sensors. And for this project, we put in 3 of them, one of them right at the crossing itself, and then 2 others on either side, somewhere upstream along the track. And so that helped us detect when trains were coming and confirmed when the crossing was blocked. And so in the field, this is kind of what the train detection sensor looks like at Waverley Street. You can see it's installed off-rail property. It's a box that hangs on an existing pole. This particular model is solar powered. There's also ones that just run off direct power. And so that's monitoring trains 24 hours a day. The next thing that we implemented, like I mentioned, were Bluetooth sensors. And we put those on either side of the track, one of them just north of the track at Taylor Avenue, and another one south of McGillivray Boulevard. And I think many of you probably are familiar with Bluetooth sensors, and if you're not, this is kind of what they look like in the field. They're again, boxes that hang on a pole that can be powered by the signal itself, and these are just monitoring vehicles as they pass by. And so that technology was giving us the travel time between those 2 points, and our train sensors were telling us when the crossing was cleared and blocked. And the third piece of technology we put in the field was a dynamic message sign, kind of near the bottom here, again, south of McGillivray Boulevard. This message sign was facing northbound traffic, and as per the scope of this project, we were trying to help northbound motorists determine when the crossing was blocked and help them make decisions to either avoid the blockage or just build that delay into their travel time. And so this is what that sign looks like in the field. Fairly standard portable variable message sign, it's solar powered, and it gives messages to drivers as they approach. So that's how the technology looked in the field and how it operated, giving drivers information. The distance, I guess, is important to note here too. There's about 1.5 kilometers between the sign and the railway crossing, and that's important for a number of reasons. One is that gives enough time for drivers to make a decision if there's options to reroute, and two, it really required, or it really made the importance of prediction very front and center, because we had to tell drivers 1.5 kilometers away when the crossing was going to be blocked, and oftentimes it wasn't blocked when we had to give the message. So we had to be pretty accurate on our predictions to say, even though the crossing isn't blocked now, we're going to tell drivers through the DMS that it is blocked, because by the time they read the sign and get to the crossing, it will be blocked. So today, and this is something that the City of Winnipeg is working through, is testing maybe different messages and to see how they work. So today, the current messages on the dynamic message sign are as follows. So without a train, it works like your typical traveler information system. It just says time to Taylor 5 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever the time to Taylor is. So that operates 24/7. When there is a train, the message changes. And so it'll say train at crossing ahead, and it'll flip between these two messages, train at crossing ahead, time to Taylor, 10+ minutes or 8+ minutes or 15+ minutes, whatever we're predicting it to be. And so those messages will flip back and forth as long as there's a train and a delay at the crossing. So one thing that we're not doing with this sign right now is we're not recommending a reroute. And so we're leaving that up to the driver to make that decision on their own. And the other thing that we're doing here is we're avoiding giving a message that says to drivers, if you speed up, you can beat the train. Certainly that's not something we want to encourage. And so with these messages, that avoids both of those instances, telling people where to reroute, and also it doesn't allow drivers to try to speed up and beat a train. We're also integrating into mobile apps, like I mentioned, and one of them is Waze, and so we're working with them to put our information into their platform in real time. There's also a picture on the left, bottom left here. That's me holding my smartphone with our live map showing. And it's a little hard to see, but what I'll explain here is that there's the roadside message sign saying train and crossing ahead, and it's actually referring to the crossing here that's shown in orange with an orange icon. So this live map has red, green, and orange icons. Red means that the crossing is currently blocked, green means that it's cleared, and orange means that it's predicted to be blocked. And so this is the issue I was talking about before. Right now, that crossing at Waverley is not currently blocked. We're predicting it to be blocked, but the sign is saying that there's a train at the crossing ahead, because we know that by the time somebody who reads the sign gets to the crossing, it will be red, it will be blocked. So it kind of highlights the predictive aspect of this system. We also integrate into the Traffic Management Center that's shown here, the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center. Sometimes they have our live map on as a separate screen. Sometimes they integrate the data into a more aggregated map that they have on their screen, but they're using this data on a daily basis. And some just high-level results before I conclude here. So one thing in our preliminary measurements in quantifying the benefit is we've seen an estimated and approximate 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. This is measured just by looking at how many vehicles diverted or did not stop and idle at the railway crossing when it was blocked, and rather, avoided it altogether. So this is a reduction in idling vehicles at the railway crossing. We also got a lot of driver feedback and qualitative information and some psychological benefits, I suppose. Drivers are telling us that they're much more relaxed and calm as they approach the railway crossing now that they know when it will be blocked. Before this, they would kind of be anxious and not know, is there going to be a train there? Am I going to be delayed by 20 minutes? What's going to happen? So we translated this as improved safety. Other drivers said that now that they can reroute around the blocked railway crossing, they don't think an underpass is needed anymore. This crossing here received a lot of complaints. It was often in the newspapers. Lots of people wanting a grade separation and an underpass. And now that they had this information, they realized that the delays weren't as long as they thought, that the sign was accurate and the delays weren't that long. And they also had that information to reroute, and that was good enough for them. And still other drivers said that they use the roadside sign every day to decide if they should reroute around the crossing. And for us, we look at that as time savings for the motorist. And like I said, there's commercial activity in the area. So we talked to some local businesses and got some feedback from a business manager who said that their employees and customers find the live travel time information helpful. It helps people reroute, to those alternate north-south routes that I showed. And also help them keep their number of customers and business fairly steady during some construction that was going on. And so we felt that was a pretty positive outcome as well. So I'll conclude now with some remarks and some observations. So the first is that grade separation is not always a viable option, whether there's cost constraints or land use constraints or political considerations or whatever the reason, grade separation can often be very difficult to achieve. But there are ITS options available as a cost-effective solution. The second remark is that many drivers just want the information. They understand that underpasses are not always possible. They understand that there's delays. What they're looking for is, reliability in their travel time, expectation, and so they really like the information piece, even though they're going to be delayed. The Waverley project demonstrated the feasibility and effectiveness of the system, and that was demonstrated by Winnipeg wanting more locations. Other cities looking to implement this system as well. And finally, for us, in talking about advanced traveler information systems, we're looking at the next generation of connected and automated vehicles, and currently in the process of developing integrated applications into, say, Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, or automated vehicle ADAS systems, things like that, to say, we look at the future and we may not be communicating directly with the driver anymore. We might be communicating directly with the vehicle, and how does that work? So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that was a high enough level presentation for this webinar, and stop there and just say thank you for, again, your time, your attention, and I would be pleased to answer any questions if there are any.
Yeah, Garreth?
Yes.
This is Dave Gray here. Having grown up in Winnipeg, it would have been great to have this system before they put in the underpass at Route 90. But how long has this been in operation?
Yep, this has been in operation since the end of July 2017. So, about over 6 months now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you weren't able to take advantage of it while you were here, but wherever you're living now, if there's a railway crossing, maybe you can take advantage of it now.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other questions? And I don't know if there's a chat box or not either. I'm not seeing anything here. But Judy, feel free to facilitate the questions or tell me to hand it over.
Yeah, I don't see any questions there, but it was a great presentation. Thank you. I think you can go ahead and hand it over to Dave.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. And Dave, I'll hand it over to you. Your name isn't showing up. Are you Patrick Fitzhenry or ITS Canada?
I'm logged in as Patrick.
Okay. There we go. Hopefully that works.
Okay.
There. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Garreth. Let's see if this works. Okay. Now, is that showing up on everybody's screen? Okay. Thanks, Garreth. My name is Dave Gray, and I'm a highway maintenance engineer with Alberta Transportation here in Edmonton. It's going to do a quick talk on mobile road sensor units on our highways. You'll probably hear me use the name MARWIS instead of saying mobile road sensor unit all the time. Even though MARWIS it's technically not a brand name, but it's associated with one of the manufacturer's units. Okay. Now, before we can talk about the mobile units, we have to go back and talk about the stationary towers that we have. Our MARWIS road weather information system, located throughout the province on our highways. We have about 100 plus. I think currently, the exact number is something like 112 stations. We add a few more every year. They're about 50 to 100 kilometers apart, and they provide real-time, 24/7 weather and road information. They give you pavement temperature at different depths, and they have forecasting ability. They're little mini weather stations. They also have traffic cameras that feed to our Alberta 511 system. And some of the information is provided on the 511 system. Some things like pavement temperature and air temperature. The screenshot there, those are the locations. If you zoom in, there's more around our ring roads in Calgary and Edmonton. And the different colors just are different conditions. The day I took the screenshot, it looks like there was a bunch of ice warnings down in the southern region, which is the red dots. Okay. There's a typical picture of one of the towers. They're great. However, one of their limitations is that they're fixed. And they're costly. They're in the $100,000-ish range, depending what kind of bells and whistles you get on them, and how many cameras and how many pavement sensors. The other limitation that they have is, which I didn't put a picture in, is in this picture, if at the highway there would be a puck, a sensor that's dug into the highway, and they're quite expensive, in the $15,000 to $20,000 range, and they have been known to be covered on highway rehabs, and then they either have to be dug out and replaced, or if we're lucky, they still work. But if we remember, we just simply put a board over it when they get rehab, and then you just dig out the board and they're fine. Now, a few years ago, we decided to get into the mobile sensors, and one of the reasons was to fill in the gaps between our MARWIS stations. Like I say, they're about 50 to 100 kilometers apart. Depending where you are. If you're on the ring roads, they're only a few kilometers apart. And a few years ago, when we got our 511 site up and running, that really increased the public's appetite for accurate and I wouldn't even say timely, I would say immediate up-to-date road conditions. So we needed something to fill in between these MARWIS stations. Also, we're in the transition in our highway maintenance contracts to going towards performance-based winter specifications, and the mobile units will greatly aid in the evaluation of the contractor's performance. The mobile sensors themselves, they're just simply devices that are mounted on just about any vehicle. I'll have a picture coming up here, and they measure just about everything that a regular MARWIS station does. There's no camera, of course, and there's no pavement temperature at depth. It's just surface temperature. And depending on the unit, some units are more sophisticated. Some units will calculate a dew point, which is great for predicting frost. Not all the units do. It really comes down to cost. And the other advantage is that with the newer units, they can display the information in real time on a central interface. So there's a website that the contractors and the Alberta Transportation staff have access to, that we can see the information coming in from the mobile units. In the future, we anticipate that some of this information will be going to 511 to the public. This is a Vaisala unit that I have mounted on my work vehicle. You can see this one has two sensors. This picture is actually a little old. This is when I first got it installed. The unit on the back bumper there is now on the front. It turned out that the exhaust, even though it comes out the other side, skewed the temperature readings. So we had to mount it on the front. Even though the manufacturer assured us that it wasn't going to be an issue. But they're highly accurate, and once they're working properly, we haven't had too many issues with them. This is the Luft unit. This is our main unit that we have the most of, and this is the one that we call the mobile advanced road weather information sensor, or MARWIS. It's a little smaller unit. There's just one unit. There's not anything on the bumper. And the units that we have are magnetic mounted. So you can just slap them from vehicle to vehicle, and then they just plug into your cigarette lighter. And then they Bluetooth to an iPad in the vehicle. But some of the units are set up so that they transmit real-time data to our central station. So this all started back in 2013 when we started deciding that we were going to move to a performance-based specification for our winter maintenance. So we thought, oh, well, we should get a couple of these units to see if they'll help us evaluate the contractor's performance. So in 2014, we purchased 2 of the Vaisala units. And then we got that at the end of a winter in 2014. And then it took a few months of the next winter to work out the kinks. Like I say, we had to move one of the units to the front of the vehicle, and it took some calibration, but they were new to us. So once we got those kinks worked out, they started working great. Then later in 2015, a company called Traffic Tech 2000 and Schneider Electric submitted a proposal to us to test 2 MARWIS units in the southern region of Alberta, in the Calgary district. And Schneider Electric at the time, they were our MARWIS provider, and their interface, which was called Weather Sentry, was used. The two test MARWIS units were hooked up to the Weather Sentry, and we could see real-time data coming in as the vehicles drove around. Just that contractor doing the test and department staff could see it. The public couldn't see that information. The contractor, Volker 7, that was doing that test, one of the examples of where it was a success was one of their remote highways that there's no MARWIS stations in the area. During one storm, typically on this highway, the procedure was they would always send out 2 plow trucks to deal with a typical storm. But with these units, you know, they were just on the patrol vehicle, so they were on a pickup. They sent one of the pickups out, one of the patrol vehicles out. Right away, the data was, you know, read right away at the maintenance yard, and they determined that they only needed to send 1 plow truck out. And after the truck went out, the MARWIS unit went over it again, and the road was in good shape. And they were right; they only needed 1 truck. So, you know, if you extrapolate that across the entire province, across 32,000 2-lane kilometers of highway, you're potentially looking at a lot of savings and a lot of, you know, reduction in greenhouse emissions. So just, you know, right away, we could see the benefit in these MARWIS units. So the province, our group in transportation, we purchased 20 units. They're approximately $10,000 each. We purchased 20 of these units and distributed them to maintenance contractors throughout the province. A few units went to some field staff with the department, and we basically said, play with these. You know, some of the units, we're in the process of hooking all the units up to our MARWIS service provider, which is now Foster AMAC, or no, now they're called Wood. And soon all of the units will be sending real-time data to our central interface, but right now just a few do. But we pretty much told the contractors, yeah, just play with them and put them on your patrol vehicles, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything different. Just do your normal patrols that you would. You know, they don't hinder any use of any of the patrol vehicles, and see what they come up with. See if there's other uses that we didn't think of, or if they can. This way, they can gear it to their own business. And then in the this is a screenshot. Sorry, this is a screenshot of one of the mobile units. And so when you look at the map, it just leaves a trail of information. And you can hover your mouse over anywhere on that line, and it'll give you the, it'll give you the readings, the pavement temperature, air temperature, and the thickness of the snow or ice, and all the readings that it takes at each of those points. And there's there's the legend there to see what the different conditions were. And those trails stay on for a few hours after its use. They don't stay on the whole time. I'm not sure exactly how long they're programmed for. I think it's just a few hours. But in time, I think we'll have this up on our public 511 site. And then in the future, we've been in discussions with the University of Alberta. They're looking to do a thermal mapping project to get pavement temperatures at night along our major highways, Highway 2 and Highway 16. And we said we have these units that are out every night in the winter collecting data. So we're in the process of partnering with them, and they'll be able to receive the data in real time and do their thermal mapping, and we'll see what comes of it. Another future use of these, as they get more and more, or I guess as we become more and more used to them and savvy with them, it'll help our accuracy for our road reporting. It will take a lot of the subjectiveness out of it, and the units will just be sending the road reports to 511 every day, and it'll just be based on whatever criteria and thresholds we have. And again, they'll be used for evaluating winter maintenance performance by our contractors. There. Any questions?
Hi, Dave. This is Judy. I don't see any questions coming in from the. Oh,
okay.
One actually. My Richard Beasley.
Question.
105 at a few minutes ago, actually. Richard, did you want to ask Gareth the question? Well, there are a few, actually. I can go through them. But if Richard, you're on the line, you can go ahead and ask your question. May have lost him. Okay, Gareth, I will maybe send you this question later and you can follow up with him.
Sounds good.
Okay. It was around cost, typical cost for a single crossing using your technology.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. So the system that I showed here would cost about 100,000 plus the dynamic message sign is a good ballpark cost. Every situation is a little bit different, but that's a good general number to start with.
The next one is from Aftab Bati. Aftab, are you on the call? He may have left as well. If you want to speak, you can. But the question is, how much time does it take to cross the train normally? I mean, how much maximum delay at the intersection?
Sure. Yeah. So without a train, actually, this corridor is fairly reliable without a train there. It usually takes between 4 and 6 minutes throughout the day, whether it's off-peak or peak period. When there is a train, it all depends on the time of day, the length of the train and its blockage duration, and whether there's kind of, 2 trains back to back, which also contributes to the duration of the blockage. And we've seen delays up to 30 minutes at this location, sometimes a little bit higher, but that can be fairly typical of the high range. And a fairly typical delay, we might see 10 to 12 minutes of delay. So, 2 to 3 times the normal travel time.
And I'm sorry, I might have missed your numbers, but how many trains cross in a day?
30 plus. So yeah, it varies day to day, but a good average is about 30.
That's
and surprisingly consistent at this location, at least. It's almost 1 per hour, almost regularly like that.
It's quite a lot of savings.
So, yeah.
No, it's a big number, especially I think over the course of a year, etc. And then you kind of look at the environmental benefits as well. There's quite a lot there, social, environmental, and economics.
Yeah, exactly. And another issue is not at this crossing, but at many others is if there's a yard nearby, a rail yard, and there's switching going on, you can often get over a dozen or over 20 blockages per day at those types of locations because they're the trains are moving across the road, switching their trains and shunting and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think happens in Calgary, and you don't want to be caught behind that. When you get this really sick feeling in your stomach because you're trapped. So it's not.
Yeah, whenever
not
the train
pleasant.
stops and backs up and goes forward, yeah, you don't feel good about that.
No. So I think that's all the questions we have that's been posted. And we are running a little bit short on time, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask, to thank the speakers. Thank you guys so much. That was great. Super interesting topics. Those of you still on the call, on behalf of ITS Canada and the ATIS committee, we really encourage you to reach out to us with your interesting topics. Myself and Patrick would be happy to help you. We're targeting 1 webinar every quarter, and we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out if you're in the middle of a project you think you might want to present later on in the year or maybe next year. We can talk about that and then arrange for it. So looking forward to hearing from you. But aside from that, I guess we'll wrap up for today and just thank you once again on behalf of ITS Canada for joining us.